Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Sierra Leoneans, welcome to the GISMED F. Suma show called Focus on Sierra Leone. On this show, we will discuss and objectively analyze the burning issues of the week in Sierra Leone relating to politics, sports, and social development, as well as other topics of national interest. We'll delve into the most controversial stories, and together we will try to make sense of them and expose you to the fact and the unique but balanced perspective on all sides of each story. In our first series of shows, we shall discuss corruption and look at the history of corruption in Sierra Leone. We shall examine what is corruption and the various ways it is practiced in Sierra Leone. We will look into how corruption has contributed to our current deplorable economic state of decadence in Sierra Leone. In the years before independence and several decades after our independence in 1961, Sierra Leone, while still a poor country, was economically viable. We had a growing economy. Our currency, the leones, was stable, and it was even stronger than most countries, especially the US dollars. And the infrastructure was sound and improving. There was a small but viable middle class that served as the engine of growth. The country was virtually debt-free, and our government budgets were financed entirely from taxes and local revenue sources. Unfortunately, over the past 3 to 5 decades, the basic standard of living of the average Sierra Leonean has deteriorated considerably. We used to export rice, our staple food. Now we cannot even import enough food for ourselves. Sierra Leone is today listed by the United Nations agencies as one of the 10 poorest nations on earth. Sierra Leone is still heavily dependent on foreign aid. The infrastructure is devastated, even though the current government is making an effort to try to rebuild the infrastructure. But there are a lot of challenges, with basic physical and social systems all in disrepair. Those challenges are very difficult to contend with. The population demographic shows an imbalance, with the majority of the people under the age of 25 and a significant number of educated middle-aged citizens or Sierra Leoneans in general, and their families are residing abroad. We call that brain drain. The level of literacy, defined as a 16-year-old being able to read and write at a Form 1 level, which is equivalent to 7th grade in the US. Read and write, or better, at a Form 1 level. In the case of Sierra Leone, that figure has not been determined accurately, but is estimated to be less than 30%. 30% of the population are the ones that are able to read and write at Form 1 level. In terms of maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates, while improving, again, due to the efforts that the current government has made, the records are still the worst in the whole of the world, according to the latest report that I even looked at yesterday. It is obvious that corruption was a key factor that contributed to this rapid regression. The causes and the effects of corruption on the development of nations, as well as how to combat corruption, are issues that are increasingly on the national and international agendas of politicians and other policymakers around the world. Now, what do we consider to be corruption? Corruption takes place in various forms and exists in every society. Corruption exists in the United States. Corruption exists in the UK. Corruption exists in every part of Africa. But what constitutes corruption or an act of corruption may vary based on the custom, based on the tradition, and based on other factors in the society in which it is practiced. Bribery is an act of corruption. You come to my office, you want me to do you a favor to use the influence of my power to be able to grant you some favor. You give me money under the table, and I give you a favor that you do not deserve. Is an act of corruption. Nepotism, few people have applied for a job, or few people have tendered for a contract, and I decide to give that contract to a relative, to a brother, to a sister, to a cousin, or a friend's son. It's called nepotism. It's an act of corruption. By every dimension is an act of corruption. Economic extortion is an act of corruption. Fraud and embezzlement is an act of corruption. You are put in a position of trust, and you decide to convert some of those resources to your own personal use. Is an act of corruption. In each case, each party has something to offer and is ready to trade it for what interest the other may provide for them. In this exchange, you have power, money, and influence. In any act of corruption, those three factors always play as a medium of exchange, which I consider as a currency for corruption. We do not know when corruption as we know it today started in Sierra Leone, since Sierra Leoneans took over administrative control of the country from the British. But our research reveals that endemic corruption started as early as 1957, when the new Administrative Council was set up by the British to include few Sierra Leoneans headed by our then first Prime Minister, Dr. Sir Milton Magai. In the same year, Dr. Magai sent a particular government official to London to negotiate the terms with the government of the British government for the exploitation of our mineral resources. We will tell you more about this story, and we'll tell you more about the very personality that was involved in that negotiation and how the deal ended up giving complete and unvetted right to our mines and our mineral resources to the British or a British company, and at the same time requiring the government of Sierra Leone to pay that British company £1 million every year for mining our mineral resources. It's like us owning a cow. We give the cow and the milk to a British diamond mining company or to an individual or a stranger and say, we're still going to pay you £1 million at the end of every year as you eat off of our milk and you eat off of our cow that we give to you, while we continue to remain impoverished. These are some of the issues we shall delve in this show, and we shall let you know the very person and all those people that were involved in such type of corruptions as early back as 1957, and also look at the different ways and how those has had an effect on the current state of decadence that we experience in Sierra Leone today, the poverty that we experience in Sierra Leone today. Since then, corruption has become pervasive in Sierra Leone. Integrity became the exception and not the rule. So we shall examine corruption in Sierra Leone between 1957 to 2012. We'll look at the people who were involved in corruption and what role they played in destroying Sierra Leone as we see it, as we know it today, and the people that were in power, and so many issues that relate to Sierra Leone and how those people contributed to the destruction of Sierra Leone, to the current state of Sierra Leone, and what became of them. Do they have assets around the world? Who are their, who are the people that inherited those assets? What has become of them? And those are some of the issues we're going to be dealing with as we move forward. So we'll take a commercial break at the moment, and I would like you to remember this show will come on SierraLeoneTV.com every Saturday at 5 p.m. Every Saturday at 5 p.m. SalonTV.com will show the Gismet Suma show, which is going to be called, which is going to be focusing on Sierra Leone, and it's called Focus on Sierra Leone. Thank you, and thank you for listening. That closing was a little